students. So I have made this video for you guys because when I gave you the assignment for writing a theme statement for The Road Not Traveled by Robert Frost, you all did an amazing job giving me a motif. And what I want to do now is help you to take that from a motif to a theme statement, okay? So you guys have a great start on it, and I'm just going to give you some suggestions on how you can make it even better and make it a full theme statement now, okay? So first, we're going to go over the learning goal like we normally do, and I've got some sentence frames down here for you. So the learning goal, please read it out loud with me as I read it. I can determine a motif in The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost and write a theme statement using a complete sentence. So what are we doing? We are determining and writing. What are we studying? We are studying motif in The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. And what is the goal of our learning? The goal of our learning is to be able to write a theme statement using a complete sentence. All right, great job, guys. Now, first thing, I want to just quickly review motif. You guys did a great job with this, so I'm going to go through it pretty quickly because I already checked what y'all gave me, and y'all gave me some really fantastic motifs. All right? So a motif is sometimes called a thematic idea, a topic, or a subject. It's usually an abstract noun, so it's not something that you could hold in your hand, but it's more like friendship or love or justice, something that's more abstract. It's usually one word or phrase, not a complete sentence. So it might not be just one word. It might be a group of words like coming of age, but it's still not a complete sentence. Now, this is a great place to start when writing a theme statement. So you guys are already on the right track. Now, when you're wanting to move from a motif to a theme, you start with your motif, and then we're going to build a theme statement around it. Now, do you guys remember Crazy D for Darius? We watched his video, and he was really silly, but he said some really great things about theme and how to find a theme. One of the things that he said is theme is not communicated in one word. So that's why, even though you guys gave me really great motifs, a lot of them were just one word. Like you may have said, the theme is fear, when really that's a motif. And so what we're going to work on today is how to go from the motif and build a full theme statement around it. So a theme statement is written in a complete sentence. It expresses what the author wants readers to know or believe about the motif. It does not include specific characters or events from the text. So when I think of theme, sometimes I think of like those moments. I don't know if y'all have had these moments, but a lot of people have had these moments when you're like sitting there with your buddy and he or she just says something really profound and you're like, dude, that was deep. Maybe you're the one that had the deep thought or the deep comment, and your friends are like, whoa, that was deep. That's what a theme statement is. It's funny, but it kind of is true because authors have a lot of deep thoughts, right? And so then they write a story or they write a poem or something to convey or express those deep thoughts that they have about life and the world and all kinds of things, all kinds of motifs, okay? So when we're moving from a motif to a theme, the first thing you want to do is choose a motif. And you guys have already done that. So y'all are just off to a great start right off the bat. Then the second thing you want to do is go back to where you remember seeing that motif in the text. So we always want to go back to the text. Now, when I say seeing that motif in the text, you probably aren't seeing that word in the text. And I think that y'all already know this, but what I mean by that is, what did you read in the text that made you think of this motif? Okay, where was that? What part of the text made you think of it? Okay, and then number 3, you're going to think about lessons learned or taught by characters, or in the case of a poem, which is what we're looking at right now, is the speaker of the poem, and messages that the author seems to be sending to the reader. So, what do you think the author is wanting to say through their story or their poem or whatever text they've written? And then number 4, think about what the author's trying to say or what the author believes about that motif, or maybe what the author seems to want you to believe. Sometimes there's a little bit of a persuasive element. Okay, now we're going to do the I do part of this. All right, so right here behind me, let me scoot it up so y'all can see it really well. I hope you can see it really well. Okay, I have some motifs written here from The Road Not Taken. So if you remember, the first thing is choose a motif. Okay, so I'm just going to choose regret. All right. And then the second step is go back to where you remember seeing that motif in the text. So here's the text, The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. I'm going to zoom in on this just a little bit here to make it bigger. Okay, now right here at the beginning, 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry, I could not travel both and be one traveler. Right there, he's already expressing a little bit of regret. So that's the first place I see it. Okay. Now, the second place that I possibly see it, and this depends on how you interpret the poem. The last sentence says, I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. It could be a good difference that it made, or it could be a bad difference. We don't know, but we get to interpret it and we get to decide. And that's the fun thing about poetry. So if I were to interpret that as a bad difference, then that could be another place where I see regret. So either way, it's obvious that regret is a motif in this text. So what's happening in the first part? In the first part, when we see this regret, he's regretting that he can't travel both roads. So he is having a lot of trouble deciding which road to take. And as we talked about when we discussed this previously, he really kind of goes back and forth, right? He almost contradicts himself a little bit. He says at one place that the 2 roads one is just as fair as the other, and then he says one has the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear. But then he goes back and says, but really the passing, that means the people walking, had warned them really about the same. So he just kind of is going back and forth. He's like, this one seems better. I don't know. They're really not that different. Okay, so we see another motif emerging, and that is indecision. So we don't have to limit ourselves to just one motif. We could actually use more than one. So we could say, regret can lead to indecision. Or we could use fear, and we could say, fear makes people indecisive, which just means that they are having trouble making a decision. Or we could say, because he also seems very conflicted, and we talked about, like, you know, he's kind of contradicting himself. So we could also use conflict, and we could say fear causes conflict. So there's 3 themes that could possibly work for this poem. And we just followed those steps that I gave you by going back to the text, thinking about where we saw the motifs, and then putting them into complete sentences. Now I want to show you something. Regret is our subject here, okay? And then we have the verb and the rest of the predicate, right? So we've used our motif as our subject, we've added a verb, and then continued with our predicate to make a complete sentence for our theme. Again, fear is our motif, we've used that as our subject, added a verb and our predicate, and again, motif as our subject, added a verb, and our predicate, okay, to make complete sentences. All right, now we're going to do the we do part. For the we do portion, I have linked these discussion cards, and what they are right here. These discussion cards give the students something to help them, like sentence frames to help them get started with their discussions. These are specifically designed for our ELs, our English language learners, but they are great for all students. So when I've used these in the classroom, all of my students, even my GT students, will grab these discussion cards and use them. And it's a great way to get them used to using different ways of phrasing what they're trying to say in discussions. So they have evidence to support your thinking, establish structures for strong collaboration. That one probably would not be used on this lesson, but it's great for group projects and things like that. Posing questions, responding to questions and elaborating on ideas, and then finally review and reflect on ideas. So the students in the classroom, the students would have these cards like on the table that they could just reach for and grab them and use them. But in a virtual setting, the students would have access to them in a digital format such as this, and they could click on their screen and look and find. So when they're engaging in a discussion, what they would do is I would have them grouped already. And so here on this slide, I would show them who is in their group. And I usually like to group them in 3s, in triads, where I have like 2 strong students and then a student that struggles more. If at all possible, I try to group them that way. So in this type of setting, they could either call each other on the phone to discuss, or they could do a Zoom to discuss, but they would need to get with their group and they would discuss the actual motifs that they chose, and they would go through this process that I modeled for them of going back to the text, asking each other questions, like, where do you see that motif in the text? Asking each other questions. And ideally, I would model the discussion for them probably in a different video or something that they could go back to, because they really need the discussion process modeled as well. Then finally, in the you do part, I've provided them with sentence frames for their theme statement. And the way that this works is the orange ones with the circles, and sometimes there's multiple sentence frames. Um, for theme statement, there really wasn't a lot of variation, but for typically the orange one is the simplest to use. So that would be for like my level 1, level 2 L's. Like right at the beginning of level 2. Then the blues are a little bit more sophisticated. So those are going to be sentence frames that students want to use when they're kind of outgrowing the orange ones. And then finally, the purple ones are the most sophisticated. So when I'm teaching this to my students and teaching them how to choose their sentence frame, I tell them to choose to choose the most sophisticated one that they feel like they can use. So if they've been using the orange ones for a while, I tell them they need to go ahead and try the blue ones. And then if they, struggle with it, then that's okay. They just need to go ahead and try to use it. Okay. And if they don't use it perfectly, that's okay. If they've been using and hanging out in the blue section for a little while, then they need to try to go ahead and move up to the purples. And then finally, the checklist is just kind of a rubric. And sometimes the rubrics that I use are more traditional rubrics. But for something like this, for theme statement, and especially in a remediation type of setting, where I'm just wanting them to get away from giving me a one-word theme statement, I just want to give them a checklist so that they can say, okay, yes, it's in a complete sentence. Yes, it has a note, it has a motif. It does express what the author wants the readers to know. It's not just a one word, okay? So they have this checklist that they can go back through, and I can also go back through. And then if they check everything off and for some reason they still need extra support, then we can just go back and discuss that one-on-one. All right, so I hope that answers your questions about this type of lesson. I chose this because I see it every single year, students wanting to give me a one-word answer for theme, and we really want to push them deeper to thinking about the author's purpose and thinking about the bigger ideas that the author is trying to convey. Thank you so much.